You sort of led a strategy over at Clarity where you guys got 3 million impressions all in 1 month. And it was primarily by getting everyone to post, sort of share that story, really exemplifying that team-led content strategy. And I'm curious to hear how that process was executed. How did it look launching that?
I realized that there was 3 buckets for this. There was the employee aspect, the executive aspect, and then the voice of the customer. And so I started off with the employees at first. My role has been to kind of help them with their content strategy and help them kind of write content and amplify their brand. We saw it going so well on the employee side of things that we're like, hey, employees are hitting other people on the same persona as them. Why don't we try the execs? That's when we started to see real results with CROs, VPs, revenue leaders. I cannot write your content for you because it's not authentic. I've seen ghostwriters on different channels and platforms and people doing that, and it's very obvious it's not written by the executive, or it's written by, for example, ChatGPT completely. So we're adding UTM links, all that, to track how many are coming from this executive's post or how many are coming from employees. Once we were able to do that, we did see a huge uptick of like, hey, 30-40% of our registration for this big event or revenue summit actually came from our employee social. So I'm like, this is kind of crazy. Like, you know, it worked. We help employees write their posts by giving them some guidance around, hey, this is some copy you can use for a product release or a press release. We noticed that people who were copy pasting were getting dinged on their posts because all of them are starting to look the same, and now LinkedIn is getting a lot smarter where they're like, hey, this was not written by you. So that's a challenge that we definitely have and are still kind of dealing with because people are still not comfortable enough to write their own posts. They love the copy paste version of it. I always say it would be ideally like you can get 25 to 30% of your company a post would be like the best case scenario. You don't realize how much that it can help reps, BDRs, AEs, etc. help them with their quota. Tracking like how much pipeline has been influenced through social media, how much pipeline has been sourced, and the numbers are looking pretty good.
Even on the LinkedIn side, I am surprised that more aren't doing it because there's so many companies that I've talked to now where like 30% of their demo requests are all attributed to team-led content. You know, I could rhyme off 10 companies who have hit that level of 30%, that's equally performing your outbound and other marketing tactics. So it's a wildly untapped opportunity at the moment.
The best advice that I always give to companies is content strategy is that
Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm here with Nehal Teneny. Nehal's broke into her career at B2B tech companies like Gong and Clary as a content marketer. She's built her own TikTok to 65K followers, landing 5-figure influencer deals with companies like Spotify and Amazon, and even worked on a Super Bowl commercial during her time at Gong. And today we'll talk to her about her strategy with growing organically on social. And before I jump into it a bit, I'll give a little bit of context as to what this podcast will really be about. Of course, this is episode 1. So on this podcast, we'll be talking a lot about team-led organic social content machines where your execs, your employees are sharing their experiences, their point of views, ultimately creating that powerful lead gen machine for the company, but also building their personal brand too. So again, Nehal, thank you a lot for being here today.
Of course, I'm super excited to be on.
We'll jump into a little bit of your personal background, a high-level overview. Of course, you spend a ton of your time on marketing, creating content, but what was sort of the journey of breaking into B2B tech as a content marketer, and how long have you been doing it for?
When I was in college, I was majoring in marketing, and I think it was the rise of Instagram and Snapchat. And so I was really fascinated by social media at a very young age. In fact, if anything, high school, if I'm dating myself out here. As soon as I started kind of dabbling on these platforms, I actually started a very simple blog on nehaltenany.com. And on that blog, I was able to share a bunch of tips around, dating advice or what I was wearing, products to buy. That was kind of my first way of really exploring this brand building concept. I was getting about 5,000 unique visitors in a month on a website that I created in college. And I knew that there was something there that I loved about creating content. So as I got my major in marketing, I was deciding like what marketing field I should go in. I was like, do I go the product route? Do I go the digital route? And that blog kind of solidified that I really loved the creation of content. And so as I started looking for jobs, my ideal place that I really wanted to work at was a place like Disney or Fox or something in the entertainment industry, because I was obsessed with movie, TV shows, and I thought marketing for that could be very fun. But it was my dad who was actually like, hey, I think that there's going to be this huge digital transformation in the tech industry that's going to take the world by storm, and there's not a lot of content marketers out there. So I think you need to get in this very hot space right now. And if you do, you can change the trajectory of your entire career. And thank you to my dad, because I joined that. I joined companies like BMC Software, then I went to Gong, then I went to Clary. And it was truly the most insane experience of my life of how B2B companies are leveraging content strategy, analytics, and thought leadership to build a brand that generates revenue.
It's so cool to hear. It all started with a blog.
Yeah.
Too.
And it's still alive. It's still alive. Okay, I don't post on it anymore, but you can check it out.
Okay, I'll have to go look at it. I guess you sort of pivoted over to social media platforms like LinkedIn and Instagram and TikTok pretty quickly after.
Yeah, so I found that Instagram and TikTok was great for my personal brand. And as I started to dabble into the B2B tech world, we found that a lot of our personas were actually on LinkedIn. And so when I joined BMC Software and Gong, that was kind of our primary audience, where we're like, okay, we're going to try to create content that is actionable, relatable, and insightful, that also has that entertainment but educational aspect of it, so that people will not only engage, it'll resonate with them, and then also it'll translate into follower growth, which meant a lot of brand awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the reasons that we first connected too. I had seen your post when you mentioned that you sort of led a strategy over at Clary where you guys got 3 million impressions all in 1 month. And it was primarily by getting everyone to post, sort of share that story, really exemplifying that team-led content strategy. And I'm curious to hear how that process was executed. How did it look launching that? How did you execute it? Is it still something that you guys are pushing really hard on?
One of the things that I noticed is that a lot of companies just talk about their brand from their brand. It's not as impactful then, because it's kind of like humbly or not so humbly bragging, where you're just saying, hey, buy from me. I promise you can trust me. I promise you, hey, just trust me. Versus when you have other people amplifying your brand. So that was kind of the play here. And I realized that there was 3 buckets for this. There was the employee aspect, the executive aspect, and then the voice of the customer. So I started off with the employees at first, because I felt like they were the people who also could get the most from their own, building their own personal brand. And so the idea that I pitched was, hey, if you build your personal brand, you will get a lot more opportunities and be known as a thought leader in the space. People were very keen on that. So the way that I went about doing this was holding brand building sessions at the previous companies that I'm at and Clary, to just tell people, hey, this is not a Clary ask. This is just me helping you. I'm helping you. Whatever you want, I got you. By getting them comfortable on social media, I realized that they were like, okay, now we want to also help with Clary's brand, because it was a lot of social selling for AEs, BDRs, etc. So they're like seamlessly infusing now the Clary's brand into their personal brand. And my role has been to kind of help them with their content strategy and help them kind of write content and amplify their brand. We saw it going so well on the employee side of things that we're like, hey, employees are hitting other people on the same persona as them. Why don't we try the execs? That's when we started to see real results with CROs, VPs, revenue leaders. Again, the job of the execs, they're not posting buy from Clary, do this. They're posting about their decades and decades, years of experience around leadership, around revenue growth. And so we really started resonating with more and more people. The customer voice is something I'm currently working on, is how do we amplify the voice of the customer? There's so many case studies, there's so many tidbits on Clary Copilot that we're already using, and recordings of the customers saying how much they love our product, but it's not the same when we talk about it. So now I'm like, how do I enable our customers to not brag about our product, but say how really it's changed their lives? Like, people are genuinely saying that, hey, I was on vacation for 3 weeks and I came back and I listened on Clary Copilot and I got caught up on all my meetings. It saved me time. And I'm like, that's what we need to be sharing so that we can actually make an impact on people.
What comes to mind when you talk about like the user generated content side is Clay, but they've totally taken over LinkedIn. What seems like thousands of people talking about the product all the time. I swear I can't log into LinkedIn on any given day and not see something about Clay.
Exactly.
But you also mentioned that the team was really keen to get started. Were there any hurdles at all when it came to buy-in? I mean, of course, Andy and Devin Reed, they're already super active. Was there anything else that kept people back? You know, imposter syndrome, fearing that they weren't expert enough to share their opinions, or just worried about what people will think in general? I'm just curious to hear the hurdle side of things.
Yeah, there was actually a lot of hurdles. There was definitely the getting started part is hard. People are not so comfortable with social media. We really had to tell them, hey, it's not going to steal your credit card number. I promise you, it's not. You just have to post. And then from that, people really resonated with the brand building session. But then after the brand building session, it's that actual posting that people were still not comfortable doing. They're like, I don't know if this is good enough. The imposter syndrome aspect of it. I don't know if people are going to like it. People were too focused on engagement. I'm like, sometimes you just have to post and build that consistency and getting comfortable. And on the exec side of things, we definitely saw hesitation with time. They're like, we don't have time to write these posts, or we don't have time to develop a content strategy. I told them, them very straightforwardly, I cannot write your content for you because it's not authentic. I've seen ghostwriters on different channels and platforms and people doing that. And it's very obvious it's not written by the executive, or it's written by, for example, ChatGPT completely. And so I said it straight up like, hey, I'm willing to do a brainstorming session with you every month. I just want to hear you talk for 30 minutes so I can understand how you talk about your leadership skills or different things in your life. And I can help you create that into content and help you do that. That was kind of the challenge across the board.
Yeah, I used to ghostwrite for a company in the crypto space. I only wrote for 2 execs, but having to schedule all of those meetings where you prompt them with questions where you can find a hot take and then you have to try to sculpt it into something that feels like them, it takes a ton of time. Luckily, I was just working on the sales team and it was sort of a side project within the company, but outsourcing to some of these ghostwriters, I've seen it hit the $10,000 range for just one exec, which is unbelievable.
I was going to say the other thing that's been really helpful, or I mean, we haven't gotten there yet, but so I'll hold off. But I was going to say that people forget that a lot of executives especially have a lot of content that's already there. They've been on so many podcasts, they've been on so many Forbes articles. It's really looking into that repurposing strategy as like a starting point.
Yeah, for sure. There's so many assets that they've collected over time and meeting transcripts, podcasts, as you said, webinars, all of that. Team meetings are great too sometimes, all of that stuff. A lot of the people who are considering doing this strategy or getting everyone to post, attribution is a huge topic too. Was that something that held you guys back, or did you find some sort of way to at least identify some sort of user base that was coming entirely through traffic?
We do a lot of link building and stuff to make sure that it's actually an impact from social media itself. The way that I look at social media is that there's 2 ways to go about it. One is brand awareness and then one is demand gen. So the awareness side of things, we're just tracking things like the amount of follower growth or how many newsletters our execs are getting on, or how much subscribers are coming to their newsletter and stuff, engagement, all of that. But then on the demand gen, we are creating and producing so many insane playbooks and guides and webinars that we're hosting. So we're adding UTM links, all of that, to track how many are coming from this executive's post or how many are coming from employees. Once we were able to do that, we did see a huge uptick of like, hey, 30-40% of our registration for this big event, our revenue summit, actually came from our employee social. So I'm like, this is kind of crazy. Like, it works. It's just getting people comfortable and realizing that their day-to-day that they spend in these meetings and strategy sessions and all of that, your brain is there. You have a great thought process, but it's how do you transfer what's in your brain into words?
So hard to get it down onto paper.
Yeah.
So sort of on the flip side, right? Like anytime you start something new or try a new strategy, the first couple of at-bats don't always go your way. Was there anything early on that totally flopped? And curious what you learned from whatever that error in strategy was.
I think there was a few different things. One is a lot of times we help employees write their posts by giving them some guidance around, hey, this is some copy you can use for a product release or a press release. We noticed that people who were copy pasting were getting dinged on their posts because all of them are starting to look the same. And now LinkedIn is getting a lot smarter where they're like, hey, this was not written by you. So that's a challenge that we definitely have and are still kind of dealing with because people are still not comfortable enough to write their own posts. They love the copy paste version of it. Other things are just like making sure that we just have like cohesive posting and there's consistency to the schedule. A lot of people don't post for like months at a time and they'll post one. And so that doesn't really help build the brand as a whole, including, I'm talking about their personal brand and also in hindsight, Clary's brand.
Yeah, I saw some stats actually recently where it's, if you take like a 3-week break from posting or a month or something like that, you take a huge ding on impressions moving forward.
Yeah, my thing is I always tell people like add a calendar hold like once a week and just like force yourself to post at like 8 a.m. or something. And then add a calendar hold at 5 p.m. so that you remember to engage with the comments and just do that once a week, build it up to twice a week maybe, and then go from there.
Yeah, makes sense. And I guess with that content strategy, how to go a little deeper into coming up with topics and brainstorming ideas, do you have some sort of structured process in place where you're thinking about different types of content pillars? Does it revolve entirely around top of funnel, mid and bottom of funnel? Are you breaking it like X number of posts for top, X number for bottom, or an X number for middle? Or how are you guys going about doing that?
So it's a little mix of everything. We definitely have content pillars that are tailored towards each executive. So making sure that not all the executives are talking about running revenue or Clary or the way that it's supposed to be. So it's like, how do we infuse that thought leadership aspect? So maybe with like our CRO, we're like more focused on selling and the revenue teams and what effect it has on pipeline and stuff. Then with our CIO, we're focused on more of the product. And so it's kind of figuring out how to make our brand spread out, but like also tailor each thing to each individual. So that's something that I do by creating content strategy, like mini playbooks for each executive. And then we also try to figure out then where does employees fall into this? Because we have three things at the end of the day. We have the Clary brand, the employee brand, the executive brand. And we've noticed that the executive brand is a lot more, that's where we get a lot more inbound because it's reaching out to VPs, CROs, execs, etc.
And when you think about breaking up like the number of posts, is it like 3 per week are going out as top of funnel and then 1 and 1 for mid and bottom, or is it more of an even split?
It's more of a like even split. So some feedback that we've gotten from execs, actually, this might be a tidbit, is they don't believe in the 5 postings a day. We actually pushed for that and we said, hey, I think that we should do 5 posts a day for you to build up that volume, that quantity and stuff. And they said it's not real if an exec is posting 5 days a week. They're like, it comes unnaturally to say, hey, we have so much time in the world that we're able to write 5 posts. And that to me was like so interesting because they were like, we would rather do 3 quality posts a week that we will work with you on and 1 bottom, 1 middle, 1 top. And like, that's it.
And how many people are there posted in total between all the execs and the employees?
So for our employees, it depends. So right now in our most recent campaign of when we had like an event coming up and we asked people to post about it, we had about 200 employees post, 150. Wow. We don't always get that. I always say it would be ideally like you can get 25 to 30% of your company a post would be like the best case scenario. For our execs, we have about, I think 50% of our execs are posting.
Okay, wow. Those are really good numbers. Did it really started to get taken seriously in May, or has it been a much longer strategy overall?
I would say it's ever since I joined Clary about 1.5 years ago. It was a very top-down initiative when we started with Andy, our amazing CEO, and we really pushed him to be like, hey, you got to do this, and the rest of the company will follow. So he was kind of not our guinea pig, but kind of our guinea pig. Yeah. And he was like very passionate about it and was very willing to work with us too. And so after that happened, we're like, okay, let's see if you can convince the other execs. And then, okay, execs started doing it. It's interesting we went this route because when I was at a company like Gong, we started with the employees first, and then we worked our ways to the exec. But at Clary, it was a different ballgame where it was like, hey, let's make execs thought leaders and then work our way down. And so I think that every company is very different, and it goes with like who's willing to buy in and also who your personas are. And so here I feel like we're more focused on revenue leaders, while at Gong, we were more focused on reps.
As soon as you talk about Gong, right, like Brian Lamana, JC, I'm forgetting his last name.
Yeah.
They've got huge brands now.
Huge brands. And that was during the time when I was there. It was like, I feel like Devin Reed was like the golden boy at Gong, and he kind of started all of this social media stuff, and it kind of trickled down. And now it's been such a part of like social selling. Aside from building your own brand, you don't realize how much that it can help reps, BDRs, AEs, etc., help them with their quota.
Yeah, there's all sorts of stats on reps being more likely to hit quota, hit their numbers if they are creating content. It's actually kind of substantial. It's funny too that you guys pushed for the CEO to get started first. It seems I'm almost hearing every day now that when I meet with people that they've been trying to convince their CEO for months to start posting content.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Are you guys able to attribute some sort of revenue number that's come entirely from the organic strategy?
Yes, we are, but I can't share that, unfortunately. So we have been tracking that. We've been tracking like how much pipeline has been influenced through social media, how much pipeline has been sourced, and the numbers are looking pretty good.
Yeah, well, it's great to hear. I mean, I'm sure they're quite substantial.
Yeah.
And then I guess with diving deeper into what the process is of creating content, where have you guys started to look to AI to help with things? Of course, authenticity is always the most important part, but it seems that there are pieces of the puzzle that can be left to AI to some degree, whether that's taking podcast transcripts or articles from Forbes, like you said, using that in combination with AI to bring out those highlights or those insights and repurposing it. Is there a specific part of the process that you're turning to AI on to help with content?
So it's definitely that repurposing aspect like you and I have talked about. So for example, if our CEO or CRO is in a Forbes article and the Forbes article has come out, it's easy for me to ask ChatGPT to create 3 or 4 social posts from the Forbes article. The challenge is the tone. The challenge is the way they write. The challenge is it sounds like ChatGPT. I have to get really specific with saying like, hey, I am XYZ from this company. This company does this. This is like the goal that I'm trying to accomplish from this post. And so it's a lot of like back and forth with ChatGPT, but it does provide some good like insights on the way when it delivers content back to me. But I have to go in and really refine it like a lot because it's not what it is. Like I can never never just post from ChatGPT. It's way too obvious. It's easier for execs because they have all these articles and backlog of content, where the challenge is it's for employees because they're not doing podcasts every day. They're not doing all of this stuff. They are in meetings all the time. Their brain is working all the time, but I don't know how to help them kind of put what they already know down on paper.
I'm biased with saying this, but if you're able to record all of your meeting transcripts, like even going down to the employees, right? SDRs, they're meeting with customers all day long. Their customers are asking them questions. They're giving insight about the market and the problems they're facing. Their reps are answering those questions likely in a really great way. And it almost seems if you can just build this library of their meetings, their emails, the conversations that they have over time, now you've got this really great library of conversations. If you can just go prompt that, like if you're an SDR, what are my top 5 prospecting tips? They can go pull from that library, and now you've got, at least it speeds up the ideation side of things and to some degree uses your own words.
No, I love that. And I completely agree. The challenge that people run into, which I also have a solution for, but the challenge that people run into is a lot of times when you're listening to the voice of customer, there is a lot of rules of like privacy, security, and stuff that you can't share it out there. But the thing that I have learned over the years through Clary, through my time at Gong, is there's a way that you can still make it into a piece of content by not giving the name away. You can say the head of RevOps at a $1,000 billion ARR company said XYZ. I feel like that adds so much more credibility to the post itself. There was like a way to do that and shape up this stuff. I think it would definitely help.
It's a great hook to put it that way too. Everyone
literally, I always use that hook. That's my favorite.
Yeah. One of the other problems too is even for the best creators, it's hard not to run into some sort of content fatigue. How do you really stay consistent and with quality content week over week, month over month, year over year? I guess there is a degree where it becomes to you, but it's also quite challenging to try and increase that volume and that frequency of posts without losing that quality too.
For me specifically, and I do this in my personal content creation life too, it's really just taking a break and taking a pause and reevaluating your content. There are times when I've written content and it just looks like I know it's not going to do well because I forced it. And I'm like, I'm just posting to post. And if you feel that way, it's time to like take a step back, get some creative inspiration, like take a break. And I usually like to look at my analytics to see like what worked, what didn't. I see like maybe the top 5 hooks that I've used that worked. And like I try, and this is where ChatGPT comes in, where I ask them to rewrite these hooks. I'm like, hey, these worked best. Can you help me rewrite them? It's really taking a break and like analyzing everything again before pushing, because it's not going to be authentic.
So sometimes even when ChatGPT rewrites hooks for you, it almost creates even more inspiration to dive deeper in.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes they use a word, I'm like, okay, don't love the word, but love the idea. Yeah. And so then I'm like, okay, cool. I have like 10 more different ideas now.
And is there any other places that you would go to for inspiration?
I really use Twitter/X a lot. I feel like there's a lot of really cool content creators and the algorithm just shows up for me where they write like the top 10 best hooks in a thread. And so I'll like read through it and screenshot the ones that I like, or I'll look through like any different random threads of just like content creation tips.
If I go into my saved library on LinkedIn right now, there's got to be thousands of posts that
I know, right?
Right now. And yeah, going back through all of those, you come up with so many ideas.
I also love taking people's posts that I really like on LinkedIn and then putting it to ChatGPT and like really being like, okay, if I wanted to like kind of write something similar to this using this idea that I had, can you help me with this out? And it's not perfect in any way, shape, or form, but at least it gives me inspiration to be like, okay, I see what they tried to do. I think I can do it better.
That's a great way to go about it too. There's starting to become this common theme with the one format that seems to be working really well. I have no idea, but it looks like Adam Robinson was the one who really started it, where it was that really bold hook, that intriguing next line, some sort of key takeaway or some sort of key lessons, and then they always finish with the takeaways. You can start to really see that structure getting used quite a bit by a lot of people now.
Yeah, and I think it's because it's like you have 2 sentences to grab the reader's attention. If they want to click see more, you get engagement. If they don't, they scroll past it. So it's like, how do you open up with something that's so enticing that'll make them want to read more, and then end with a call to action of like, is it downloading something, or is it just follow me, or is it just like a wrap to some like the beginning of your sentence or something? So I always try to like end with like something inspirational or something just like, okay, you're taking this away. Good luck with your next call.
With all of your experience now in creating content, is there a variety of best practices that you follow or structuring tips? I mean, I've seen you and Devin Reed, you guys talk a lot about, is it fire starters?
Yeah. We love a good fire starter. Devin has been my mentor for 4 or 5 years now. I always like to say he's like my mentor, my brother/dad and best friend. He actually introduced me to the concept of a fire starter. We kind of ran with it. It's basically that you do something polarizing on social media. So you do a polarizing hook to see people argue in the comments. So the end of the day is not to like say completely ridiculous because you don't want people to like say you're wrong in that sense, but it's to spark debate. So I'll be like, people say this is the most underrated skill, and then I'll say it. And like people are like, no, this is not the most underrated skill. No, this is overrated. So it's using words like underrated, the best, the worst, and fusing that into your hook so that people are like, you think that's the best or you think that's the worst, and then going from there.
It's a tough balance too, because you don't want too many people to be taking the opposite side of you. You do need a little bit of people to agree. I was watching a podcast with Neil Patel the other day, and they were talking about, I think this is probably more for Instagram, but starting another account, kind of a fake account, and then being the first to comment, but saying something like hateful. Like,
interesting.
Like putting in your own hater, and then everyone starts fighting in the comment section, which ultimately just pushes the post even further. I mean, it's funny. A cheat, but it seems like it worked really well for them.
I mean, do you remember back in the days when like Twitter was like always having those fights between all these fast food companies? You have like KFC versus McDonald's, and like I'm sure they all work together behind the scenes. I was like, how do you create so much controversy and so much engagement to spark just conversation?
I mean, Twitter's always been a war zone for that, but it seems shit posting on LinkedIn is becoming more common too recently. I always wonder if the guys who are going back and forth at each other have some sort of relationship.
Yeah, like an alliance or something.
Because I'm sure it drives a ton of revenue. I mean, I'm always sending it to people when I see them start going at each other. One of the big questions that I wanted to ask you too is, where do you see the future of organic social and content creation going? And the reason I ask, there's a lot of go-to-market leaders who are beating the outbound is dead drum, or on the traditional marketing side, speaking to how SEO is taking a huge hit with Google and implementing more AI. People are starting to talk about large language model optimization over SEO optimization. It almost seems that some of the industry has come to some sort of general consensus that those two trends are going to continue to decline. Obviously, there's others fighting that, saying that it's thriving still. But where do you see it going, the next 5 years? Do you think the decline will continue? Do you think the organic social media will become more of a push? I've seen some people even take it as far as saying that in 5 years from now, they believe every B2B company on the planet will train the intern up to the CEO in building a personal audience online.
I was actually going to say that stat. I 100% believe in it. The way that I can kind of back this up is I've talked to a lot of revenue leaders about if they are ever looking for training for their employees or execs, and it is very top of mind right now. They are really wanting to push this narrative around how they can build internal thought leaders to amplify not only their own brand, but to help employees, execs to build their personal brand outside of this all. Because there's so much return to it. You get asked to come on podcasts. It's like free marketing at the end of the day. You're already paying these people a salary to be a part of your company, and they're getting more out of it too while you're getting free marketing. And so I see a push in the next year, not even 5 years. I think next year is going to be the year of the rise of thought leaders, influencer marketing times 10. And I'm not talking about the traditional model of influencer marketing that we see around TikTok and Instagram of like where people are doing brand deals and stuff. But I think like actually becoming thought leaders for social selling purposes and to grow the brand we're going to see it. It's going to happen.
Adam Robinson really champions the future of the BDR as the YouTube creator, where they're just spending their entire day creating content. You mentioned, a lot of people are coming to you now sort of talking about wanting to create content. Should they be creating content? If a company did come to you and ask you those questions, how do I get started? Should I even get started? What would sort of your answer be, or your advice to helping them take the plunge, I guess?
I think I would like try to figure out what their goals and objectives are. Like, are they trying to just have brand awareness in terms of just amplifying their own brand? Or are they trying to actually make an impact on pipeline? Going from there, I would give a few different options of like, hey, I think you should double down on this part of content strategy, which is creating more demand gen assets like playbooks, guides that people will download that's relatable to the content that you're already talking about. Or I'd be like, hey, invest in social media and make your employees thought leaders, etc. And so it would really have to depend from company to company.
One of the things that I've even been battling with my own content is, and it's obvious what works for some people doesn't for others, but it's almost like it's not what gets said, it's who's saying it, what is their level, what company are they at, how big is that company. It's almost like what works for a Gong or a Clary wouldn't work at all for an early stage startup. So finding that your stride with creating content is tough. I mean, Adam Robinson's a great case study, right? He was creating content for the e-commerce sort of founder, right? And then as soon as he pivoted over to B2B SaaS, everything really changed.
And it's also like who the target audience is for your content. Like I go back to Gong and stuff, and we were very like reps, managers focused. And so we were able to play with it more, the brand, that we were able to create memes and GIFs and use pop culture to kind of like become like that fun brand. But at Clary, we are selling to to revenue leaders. And so because of that, our brand is a little more buttoned up. There is room for fun, but the content that we put out has to be different. I always do offer this. If any company ever wants to chat or something, I offer different packages for helping a company like audit their current content strategy and then seeing what their content strategy could look like. I would just have to do a full audit and be like, okay, this is what plan we're going to create for you. And because it's not one size fits all.
Having started with writing in the crypto world, I guess fintech, it's a totally different approach that you have to take. And I mean, even internally, all of these fintech companies are so much more worried about what's getting said, how they're saying it. Whereas if you're selling MarTech or sales tech and obviously selling to marketing and salespeople, that's where you're starting to see these sales rappers come out, right? Where it's a lot more of that fun strategy content versus having to still, on the fintech side, really keep that professional sort of tone and language.
The best advice that I always give to companies though is like, please just don't overdo it with buzzwords and just not making it digestible. If you're even going to keep it buttoned up, 8th grade reading level, like always write in an 8th grade reading level so that people can easily digest what you're saying. So if I'm scrolling and I see one word that just like doesn't make sense, or it's just like, you should inspect this, or why don't you just say you should just look at this or go look at it? And I'm like, okay, this is not for me. Moving on.
When AI first came out, it's wild how many blogs I've seen where they said like the digital landscape or harnessing the power of AI and the digital.
Yeah, the power of AI or the revenue revolution. I'm like, it's not.
Yeah, I mean, ChatGPT loves those buzzwords. It'll never drop it. So it's hard to not use that if you're new to it. Because I mean, it sounds impressive. It
doesn't look like, what you're saying.
Yeah, that's kind of all the questions I had to ask you today. Is there anything that I didn't ask that I should have?
Honestly, this was a great interview. I felt like we touched on a lot of things. I know you and I both have a passion for like brand building and also getting other folks to build their brand, because I feel like it's like the missing ROI on everywhere. I'm like, you're literally missing out on free resources at your own company that you're not using. And I feel like it's a waste of money. And I always tell people this too. I'm like, you guys, if you're not building an Instagram or a TikTok, you're missing out on free money. Because as soon as you start building, these platforms are paying creators just to post content. So it's like you can easily be making around $5,000 a month for doing absolutely nothing. I'm not going to say nothing because creating content, it takes a lot of time. But you know what I mean? If you have content, just like post it instead of thinking about it and just have that be like a money engine at the back too for your own personal brand.
I need to get started on Instagram and TikTok for sure. But
you gotta get on TikTok. TikTok has been like the most ultimate growth I've ever seen in my entire life. Like I grew from 0 to 70,000 in 2 years. Like it was insane.
Yeah, I gotta get better at recording myself on video. I've never even done it. So I know those first ones, it's gonna feel super cringe, but I just have to do it.
Yeah, it's kind of like this. I'm looking at you in like a little TikTok format right now. And I'm like, hey, it's just like you're talking. It's just getting comfortable with the camera and being like, I'm just gonna post. Are you a millennial?
Yeah.
Okay, I was gonna say, I didn't want to assume. Okay, millennials are just people who like have the millennial pause at the beginning. And so I remember like having a TikTok and they called me out on it. They're like, you don't have to pause every time you talk at the beginning. They're like, just talk. Like you always go like, okay, and then I want to tell, and they're like, you just talk. And so I had to learn the millennial pause. But after I got over that.
That's funny. That pause is exactly what's created that trend where it's like when I let Gen Z edit my TikTok and they're doing that. Even on the LinkedIn side, I am surprised that more aren't doing it because there's so many companies that I've talked to now where 30% of their demo requests are all attributed to team-led content. I could rhyme off 10 companies who have hit that level of 30%, that's equally performing your outbound and other marketing tactics. So it's a wildly untapped opportunity at the moment.
People forget that all content doesn't have to be polished. Like you shouldn't be like spending thousands of dollars at a studio to make a video that you could easily make on a vertical phone screen. And so I always tell people like the reason that I love TikTok, for example, is because they have a green screen. I can literally take a photo of a product and just be talking about it like this, and it comes off more genuine than a product video.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Riverside's $20 a month, and
literally.
Those reviews are insanely pricey. Thank you so much, Nehal, for being here. Thank you for joining for episode 1. Would love to have you back on it in a few months.
Obviously, I'm always down. Love sharing content marketing tips, and also very passionate about other people building their brand. One of the things that my friends always tell me is we go to dinner and we grab some wine, and then 5 minutes into the conversation, I'm telling each one what their personal brand should be and like why they're not investing in their personal brand, all the money they're missing out, and all the brand stuff they're missing out in. Clearly, I have a passion for it. But thank you, Sean, for having me on.
Yeah, it'll be exciting to see what the next year looks like for all of these creators.
Yeah.
Awesome.